Welcome back, everybody. I hope you guys had a good lunch and had a chance to take a look and get your final votes in for the photo contest. Our next session is called the Exposé, BC Programs Pathways. The idea of student-centered support can show up in various forms and can come from a variety of different sources and groups. Here in British Columbia, we have resources such as the BC Transfer Guide, obviously, and Education Planner BC, and they show a variety of ways that students can pursue pathways to help them achieve their academic goals. However, there are plenty of additional pathways out there for students, and many of them come in different shapes and formats and different sizes. Our next panel is going to discuss some of the goals and hurdles that face different post-secondary partners in bringing forward and operationalizing program pathways, especially when faced with an increasingly diverse group of transfer students. Enjoy. All right, welcome to our session. One of the challenges that we deal with here at BC CAT with regards to the BC Transfer Guide is how do you show and display all the different types of pathway opportunities available to transfer students? There are many pathway opportunities available, and many of them don't really fit into a nice box of sending and receiving agreements. Many institutions have collaborated on developing opportunities that enable student mobility. And for this session, we're going to ask our panelists a handful of questions to help highlight some of the goals and hurdles they have faced as they have worked to build partnerships and operationalize program pathways for transfer students in our BC transfer system. So with that, I'd like to welcome our panelists, Brian Dick, Professor and Chair of the Engineering Department at Vancouver Island University, Jennifer Cook, BC CAT's Manager of Technology Services, Rella Ng, Registrar at Douglas College, and Dean Pogas, the Director of Marketing and Engagement at Education Planner BC. Welcome, everybody. So the first question I want to ask is, why are program pathways important? Are they important? Jen, why don't you kick us off?
Good question, Mike. Thanks. Our work at BC CAT, at its core, it seeks to facilitate student mobility and transfer. So it's not unusual for students to begin a program completing a chunk of courses toward a credential, and then for various reasons have to complete that program or credential within a different community at a different institution. So facilitating this type of transfer option is part and parcel of the work that we do at BC CAT. But I would venture to guess, for most folks in the BC transfer system, not necessarily students, we are more familiar with breaking down this transfer down to the course level. And that's probably because it's the easiest form to address and evaluate transfer credit. But transfer options do come in different forms as well. And our work at BC CAT on the BC Transfer Guide will be to communicate those transfer options to transfer students more effectively.
All right, Brian, from your perspective, why are program pathways important?
Thanks, Mike. Well, from my perspective, these pathways promote equity, they provide choice, and they create opportunities. Not every school can offer all things to everyone in their region, but collectively, there's a rich and diverse set of programs available. So I look at from the engineering perspective, a student coming from a smaller school may be interested in engineering. They're uncertain what if it's right for them. Their grades may not be very high, money might be tight, and they may just fundamentally not be ready to leave home. That story is not terribly unusual, but engineering is only offered in the major centers in the province. So in order to attend that program, they have to leave their own communities, support systems, they incur additional costs to study in a program they may or may not know much about. So for many of these students, the program pathways provide a stepping stone and an opportunity to experience that program in a more graduate center. So, these pathways provide some clarity. They assure students can progress without too much difficulty, provided they meet some of the requirements at a time. And so, going back to our original student, they know their local college has a pathway agreement with one of the engineering schools. They can start their studies there. They know they have maybe a continuing education program to upgrade their skills, and they get some support in their local community while they sort of figure out exactly where they want to go. I would say program pathways are pretty important.
And so, Rella, as a registrar at Douglas College, how do you find that program pathways are important to your students?
Program pathways, I would say, serve as a recruitment tool for us. It's a way to round out the programs to entice the prospective students. It helps facilitate that seamless transfer for students as they are tailored to help students meet those first and second requirements of a university degree. At Douglas, we often encourage students to explore courses, programs, and career options, but I think it's also overwhelming for students when they see the large selection of courses available to them. The stories that I hear from students are, what should I explore, or what's good? I'm interested in this, but where does that get me? Or I don't want to commit to a specific career path, but I also don't want to waste time. So I think many of the Associate of Arts and Sciences are good exploration pathways for students. It's structured to help prepare and guide students into a degree program, but it's also special. It's also got the specialized program for those who already have a more definitive career path in mind.
All right, and over to you, Dean, at Education Planner BC, which is the common application and planning service for the province of British Columbia. How do you feel the pathway programs are important to your organization?
Yeah, in a similar vein, pathways are critical information for students planning their education journey, right? It helps them improve their access and mobility. Education Planner BC has a very clear mandate to support access to PSIs in BC. In particular, ensuring students in those historically low transition areas have access to information that may be specific to their needs. And kind of similar to what Brian was saying, this can include, example, rural students or other students who might benefit being able to stay closer to home and then transition through a pathway agreement to another institution.
So sticking with your organization, then, what does that work involve for you and your organization when it comes to pathway development?
Sure. Well, Education Planner BC has a very detailed program search mechanism, and we recognize, I think as does BC CAT, that there are some complexities sometimes around the language and usage of some of these program pathways that may make it even difficult for learners to know about these pathways.
And so looking over to you, Rella, from an institutional perspective, what is the kind of work that is involved with creating pathways within Douglas College?
The work usually starts at the faculty with the program chair, the dean, and our provost. Initial meetings usually between the partner institutions, usually with their dean, their program chair, and also someone from the provost's office. After the initial meeting, appropriate people at both institutions would begin working on developing a transfer grid. An initial agreement would be developed. This draft agreement would go through several iterations with consultation with different stakeholders. For example, the registrar's office on the admissions, if we are a receiving institution for that program pathway. The role my team and I play in are about supporting the program areas on operationalizing that pathway and getting it in place. So we'd be supporting the program areas through the governance and the articulation process, making sure the information is available on our websites, advisors are trained and aware of the pathway to advise the students accordingly.
All right. And Brian, you have a ton of experience in developing the Engineering Bridge program, which is not just a pathway between two institutions, but involves many institutions. I'm wondering if you can tell me about some of the work that was involved with that. And, did you ever have any time to teach after getting involved with that program?
Like, yeah, it's been a busy time, and certainly, the work involved. I guess it comes really down to one word for me, anyways. It's collaboration. Students in these program pathways, they ultimately want clarity, and so for us to, we've been working very well with our partners at UBC, UVic, TRU, SFU, UNBC, and so on to build sort of formal pathways into those schools for students starting at, in our case, at VIU for the first year and moving on. But at the broader articulation community, the engineering articulation community moved towards creating and implementing a common first-year curriculum that was acceptable at all receiving institutions. And this was, provided a lot of support by not just BC CAT, BC Campus, the provincial government, and again, was going back to just providing that clarity to students. It did, in terms of the work involved, a lot of talking, a lot of goodwill from all the partners, a lot of collaboration, and the intent that everybody really did want students to get from point A to point B, and it was just trying to make the structure to make it happen. And I know at the various institutions there was even additional collaborations and discussions that were taking place. So there was a lot of work.
All right, and then finally over to Jen. We're working with pathways on a system level, so you don't represent a single institution, but basically all of transfer institutions that are part of our system. What do you feel the Pathways, what is the work involved for you when it comes from the BC CAT perspective?
So all this good work that's happening at Douglas, at VIU, and among the system, our sister partners, that information, when it gets to us, we want to put it on the BC Transfer Guide. Currently, we have block, degree partnerships, associate degree, and program-specific transfer agreements that are listed or searchable on the BC Transfer Guide for transfer students to be able to find out this information. And that workflow involves an email to us. After all the work has been done, we're the last in line, hoping to get this information so that we couldn't put it on the BC Transfer Guide. So that's kind of inherent with that are challenges and some of getting that information to us so that we can have that available for students that are not maybe ready to commit to a particular institution, just want to see what is out there for them as they do that exploratory work, just like on UBC. That's the student we're hoping to serve.
All right. I'm going to turn my focus to you again, Rel. You mentioned in your previous answer, talking a little bit about the transfer and articulation work when it comes to Pathways. I'm wondering if you could tell me a little bit more about what some of the challenges you've encountered with articulating program pathways and what have been some of the successes?
Challenges are, I would say, some program pathways require revisions every year. So institutions sometimes don't inform us of a program or course change. And so another challenge is also trying to find a course at Douglas that would transfer to meet specific requirements for one program that may not meet another. And that pathway is to transfer to multiple programs or institutions. Turnover in people is also a challenge. Getting a program's pathway set up takes a while. It's not an overnight process because of all the collaboration Brian had mentioned. So it takes, I would say, roughly a year to get it set up. And so when there is turnover at either institution, that becomes a challenge because it delays the process. And some pathways are more straightforward than others. So the other challenge is ensuring students understand it and that all advisors who would have a role in advising students are aware of the nuances of the different pathways and how they work. So as a sending institution, if the transfer requirements of the receiving institution are not clear, it's a challenge for us to support the students because students may assume that they then advance into a third year of studies and have met all of the first and second year requirements, but sometimes that may not be the case. And maybe another challenge would be is when pathways don't necessarily offer the guarantee admission, and this may be more of a success that we can kind of talk about afterwards as well, is we see many students' goal is to transfer to, let's say, an X institution. And when admission is competitive, students often don't complete the pathway. Students can apply to transfer when they have completed the 24 credits. So as soon as they are admitted to X institution, they will leave Douglas. So it's hard for us to measure and sometimes determine if the pathway is a success or not, because students didn't complete the pathway.
All right. And so, Dean, sorry. All right. And then Dean, from your perspective, what are some of the challenges or successes you've had with regards to your work with Pathways?
Yeah, thanks. Well, as part of our analysis, we always look at areas where there have been successes and how we can build on them. Education Planner BC showcases these pathways. So it's important for us to always have the most up-to-date information so students can have all the information they need when they're using our website. I think a challenge is the use of language that is very specific to our sector that can become confusing when explaining it to students because they are using different words. So having a common language to address the sector is really important. I think one thing we're really excited about is the development of our new website, which will allow the ability for applicants to save past searches, which will provide a clear line of sight how applicants are actually searching for these pathways and related results to them.
I'm excited about that too. I think that's going to be a welcome development for both current and prospective students. Jen, I'm going to turn the question over to you. What do you think are some of the challenges or successes when it comes to working with Pathways?
So we conducted an external review in 2019, and out of that, it became a little more apparent that students and student support staff were more familiar with the course-to-course type of transfer option and less aware of the other types of program transfer options they were available to them when they were on the BC Transfer Guide. So for us, it became apparent that we ought to perhaps try to communicate more of these transfer options, make students a little bit more familiar that they exist for them. So that's one challenge, definitely. And I think that faces anyone that has information on a website, and then you're trying to get people to look at it. But the other challenge is one that has been already alluded to. We are the last in line of this entire process, and it is a work. It's an endeavor for partners, PSIs, people that are working on these program transfer options. So getting that information to us reliably and consistently is something that we need to work on, right? So I think those are two big challenges that we face when we're trying to make program transfer options a little bit more accessible and available to students that are on our website.
All right. And finally, over to you, Brian. Now, we've heard a little bit about the challenges. Maybe you could tell us about some of the successes you've had with your Pathways work.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the challenges that were identified, and it's when we speak of collaboration, there's a lot of group and communicating changes and so on throughout. And engineering has accreditation issues and so on that can also impact it. Now, within the one thing we have been able to do in the articulation committee is at those annual events to try and address some of the idea of tracking how well students are doing upon moving, and not individual students, but at least where students are going, how successful as a group they are when they arrive. The receiving schools are starting to provide a lot more of that information in an conglomerate form, so that we can sort of get an idea of which where students end up going, which schools and so on, as well as how successful they are upon arrival. Now, in practice, they do well, fundamentally, and there isn't issues. But if there were something were to seem off or whatever, it would give us a chance to reflect on that. So that's all part of that. The common curriculum. If we have that sense of a common set of courses that students can take, not just the courses though, and that's I think on the success side is. As we mentioned, it's not just the course by course. This program pathway speaks of the courses, but also the conditions that they need in order to transfer. So some schools require time dependency. Some schools require certain courses at certain levels. All of those need to be articulated and understood by students going in. So yes, they know going in that if they do this with these conditions, the receiving schools will accept them as if they had started at those receiving schools from day one, and that's ultimately gives the students assurance that they can start their studies with the smaller schools.
All right, and I'm going to stay with you for this last question. Sometimes working in the articulation world, you have a bit of that old question. If a tree falls in the forest and no one hears it, does it matter? Well, if you create an articulation and no one knows about it, it doesn't make a difference. So I guess one of my questions for you, Brian, is how are students finding out about these pathways?
And it's a good question. And this actually may speak to some of the challenges, because we're in my particular role, we may or may not be connected well to, say, the counselors at the high school system. And so, in terms of the information that students get from as they're approaching post-secondary, we often get it anecdotally, or perhaps, from surveys from students that may or may not be very informative. So how do we, directly, how do we do? We visit classrooms in our local regions, high schools, and there's turnover at the high schools as well, so that can cause some challenges. But we try and visit classrooms. We do speak to high school counselors, so they're informed on it. Obviously, the websites at not just the sending schools, but the receiving schools are kept up to date. The receiving schools, our partners, they do a lot of visiting to high schools as well, and they also emphasize these transfer pathway agreements for students. So that's a positive. Well, of course, there's a transfer guide even on the course by course that gives students assurance when they look in. They can see some of the courses working, and Ed Planner gives an idea of what programs are even available in their area for the students who are doing those seeking. So, it's a collective effort, but like Rella said, it's keeping everybody on the same page is an ongoing challenge. And one of the successes, I think, of the common curriculum work is that the receiving schools have committed to not making changes that impact them over like a 2-year period. So it gives them a chance, they can communicate, and then we have a while to sort of adjust to that if we need to.
All right. And Rella, from your perspective, how are students finding information about the different pathway opportunities at Douglas College?
through our websites, recruitment events, counselor information day, our information fairs, and definitely through our advisors when they meet with students. So hence why it's very important for us to make sure our advisors are aware of all of the different programs, program pathways, so that when they're advising students, they know what is the right program to provide that information to students.
All right. And Dean, from a system perspective, what's EPPC doing to help students find information about pathways?
Yeah, well, just kind of speaking similar to Brian, we have a whole engagement team. So at Education Planner BC, we meet annually up to 15,000 grade 10, 11, and 12 students and their parents to speak to them. So during these engagement events, we share with them the pathways that are available, at least the ones we know about their local PSI. So what we do really is we prime them with the knowledge they need, both through our engagement activities and through our website, so they have a starting point of awareness.
All right. And finally, over to you, Jen. How are students finding out about pathways from the BC CAT perspective?
So we're quite lucky to have a centralized resource like the BC Transfer Guide. If students are actually on like just a search engine trying to find out more about post-secondary and transfer in BC, we're going to be on the top search results. We're just there. And so for us, it's just general website and search engine optimization, but also post-secondary partners do direct BC Transfer Guide, do direct their students that are at that preliminary exploratory stage from their website to look up courses and information on the BC Transfer Guide when they're not perhaps admitted or they are not that far along yet in their search for program transfer options. So we get the students that are supposed to hit our website at the right stage, I believe. It's just making sure that they get the information that they need and they know that it's there for us.
All right. Well, I really appreciate you guys taking the time to have this conversation. This was very informative. And just as a reminder to our delegates, if you have questions, we're going to be switching over to the live portion of this presentation. So please put your questions into the chat, and we're going to switch over to the live session right now. Okay, welcome back, everybody. It is now my pleasure to welcome Jen, Dean, Rella, and Brian. These are our panelists that you will know from the previous recording. And once again, to the audience, the floor is open, so please submit your questions both in the chat or the Q&A, because this is your opportunity to ask a question of our panelists. I see we've got a couple already in there. Jennifer Chutter from SFU is asking, how do you see the move towards developing micro-credentials fitting in with the pathways between institutions? Jen, do you have any thoughts on that?
My general thought is the BC transfer system is predicated on trust. Like I think Brian mentioned before, there's a lot of goodwill in developing these engineering pathways amongst the PSIs involved, and micro-credentials will fall under that same umbrella. The form of it is a course or a credential, and the receiving institution will have to evaluate it based on those terms. I think it's new, so it's unfamiliar, but it's not actually in the principles that will underlie articulation of such a credential. Well, I guess that's my thoughts.
All right. What about you, Rella? How do you feel? Do you see micro-credentials fitting in the pathways between institutions?
Like Jennifer said, I think it's something new. I think we're all trying to understand the framework of micro-credentials. I think it really comes down to as pathways. It's really about kind of the receiving institution. So sending institution, it's going to have to look at, whether the receiving institution has something that actually can take this micro-credentials. Because I think a lot of the times right now with micro-credentials, it's a combination of either continuing education or the credit side or a combination. So it really is looking at what is the micro-credential to then actually determine that next step of the conversation.
All right. And we have a question here from Shauna Rossloot from Saskatchewan, who is asking, are the BC CAT articulation committees the main vehicle for pathway development? Brian, you have a lot of experience with articulation committees. How important was the articulation committee in developing the pathways within the engineering program that you developed?
Yeah, thanks, Mike. Yeah, and I'm vice chair of the engineering articulation committee now, but at least I can't speak for all of these pathway agreements, but certainly within the engineering articulation agreement, the pathway that we developed for moving students into the receiving schools has been like a multi-year project within that group. We had an idea, we moved to a feasibility study, we moved to an implementation plan, and then we actually implemented it and got funding and all that sort of stuff. So in our case, certainly was originated within the articulation committee. And quite frankly, it was through needs that were brought up throughout the conversations that took place at that committee. But that's been my experience. I can't speak for others, but I suspect that it would be a very similar background.
All right. I have a question for you, Dean. From your organization's perspective, what pathway information must be communicated to students? What is the critical pieces of information that need to be included so that students are aware of pathway opportunities?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think for us, it's about having all the information that's possible from the PSI. So where it's possible for a student to start at their local community college, whether it's an engineering program or a nursing program, and then how they'll be able to transfer to potentially another post-secondary institution. So the courses that needs to be taken, the duration of the program is also very helpful.
Okay, and then we have another question. I'm going to give this one to you, Brian. Kathleen Lewis from Northern Lights College asks, what is the advantage to creating a pathway like the ones that were discussed in this session versus creating a degree or diploma?
That's a good question. In some respects, we've done both. So within the engineering articulation committee, that pathway agreement was effectively a 1-year set of courses that many institutions are aligning to a certificate. So it's a credential, not a diploma, but it's at least a certificate level, which then goes into the can be received by the receiving school. The biggest challenge right now is ultimately it's still treated as a course by course basis. So even though we got many schools might have a certificate, the receiving schools will typically not take a certificate completion, but rather they dive into it and then do the course by course transfer, which then goes through the BC transfer guide and so on. So many schools do the certificate or credential approach because it adds some clarity, but ultimately it will usually boil down to the course by course, at least for now.
Okay, and then Rel, I have a question for you just regarding the operationalization of pathways. How much time does your organization need to accommodate changes to program transfer agreements from sending PSIs when new program pathways come into development?
I would say just looking at from our governance kind of at our institution, any kind of curriculum changes or proposals would probably take about an 8 to 12 month kind of governance process from taking through to all of the different subcommittees and then finalization to our governance of education council approval and then implementation. It is roughly about an 8 to 12 month cycle.
All right, and I'm going to actually direct this last question to you, Jen. Are there programs or disciplines that you think BC CAT should like to focus on or prioritize when it comes to program transfer, and why?
Yes, I do think there are. So I feel like back to the question that Brian answered about why would we create a pathway versus a diploma or another type of credential, I think the student we're trying to serve is the one that might be more mobile. Like they have different needs and will be transferring. So if folks that were listening to Dr. Macquarie's session on reverse transfer, this idea that like students will accomplish something and then they package it, they can show, like even in the micro-credentialing conversation, they can demonstrate they've completed something, and then it may encourage them and or their employee to pursue further education. It's kind of a nice marker that they've accomplished something. So I feel like yes, the diplomas are necessary, certifications are necessary, pathways are also necessary. Like, so it's just, I guess it's supporting access for students. At the end of the day, like they're different. They're different, so they're going to need different things.
All right. Thank you for that. And thank you to all the panelists for joining us live today. I really appreciate your perspective on this. I think these are important vehicles to help students as they move their way through our system. And I just want to thank you for all the work that you've done to support student mobility and pathway development. We are at 1:30. Our next session will begin at 1:45, where we will be inviting Anna Takina from BC CAT, who is going to give a presentation on the student transfer experience. Please join us for then at 1:45. Thank you.